Okay, so we are back. We have just created a oscillator and envelope object that we can now trigger with a key press. Okay, and we are changing the frequency using the MIDI to freq function as the argument for our os.freq method, in which I can use MIDI notes like 60 or 70 instead of just frequencies like 220 hertz, 1000 hertz. So now we have the ability to play specific musical notes like C and D, E and F, etc. Okay, but what we're going to learn about now is how we can have a bunch of different notes that we can access at any given time in a data structure called an array. So in Sonic Pi, we dealt with arrays as a way to store a bunch of different values into one single place. We're going to learn how to do that in p5.js. We're also going to learn a little bit about arrays in general and sort of how to refer to the values inside of an array, the order and the number system that we use, okay? So I'm just going to go over to this slide for a second, okay? So remember we make an array with square brackets, okay? And then we just put a bunch of different values in our array. So I just went by 2s, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 values in my array. Okay. We also know how to make variables. Okay. And in this case, since I'm just going to call it A. So let's say I made a variable called A, and that variable now holds an array. Okay, so A doesn't just hold one value, it holds a array of values. Okay, so A, when I just refer to A by itself, I refer to A as 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12. So A holds all those values. Okay, now each value in the array has what's called an index. And this is just say, let's say we want to refer to one of the values inside of this array, which we are calling A. And there is a way to do that. So A by itself is all of these values, but it is possible to just say, okay, I just want to get this one value out of the array. How do I find it? How do I refer to it? What do I call it? Okay, so the way we could do that is something called an index. Okay, so every value in an array has what's called the index, which is basically just the number that it appears in the array, what order it happens in. All right, so as often in computer programming, you think like zeros and ones. We always start with 0. We don't start with 1. So the first value in my array, the index would be 0. So if I said A0, okay, or the index of 0, that would be referring to the first value in the array. And the second value would be 1. The third value would be index 2. The fourth value would be index 3, the fifth would be index 4, the sixth would be index 5. It's a little confusing. It takes some getting used to, but once you kind of get the idea, it makes a bit more sense. Okay, so now I can refer to specific values in this array by their index. And the way I do that is I can refer to the array, and then inside of square brackets, I could just put one number. So A0, referring to the index, would be 2. All right, so if we wrote A0, the computer would know that that is 2. If we wrote A1 inside of these square brackets, the computer would look for this index number, which is index 1, that value in the array, and that would be 4. Okay, so we could also think of it in reverse. If I said, what is the index of 6? You would say it is A, and then in square brackets you'd count, okay, the first is 0, the second is 1, the third is 2. So A2, the value would be 6. If I said, what is the index of 8? We would think, okay, 8, the index is 0, 1, 2, 3. So A3 would be 8. And that is how we refer to values inside of arrays by their index. Okay, so just a question here. What is the value of A4? So we have our array. We would just then think, okay, what is the fourth index of the array? So what's that index for? So this is index 1, or index 0, index 1, index 2, index 3, index 4. So the value of A4 would be, take a moment and say it, 10. Okay, so 10 would be at A4. And then if I said, what is the index of 12 in this array? We would just go, okay, 2 is 0, then 1, then 2, then 3, then 4, then 5. So the index of 12 would be A in square brackets 5. All right, so hopefully that makes sense. And it's going to get a little more complicated, I'm not going to lie, but this is sort of a good starting off point. Okay, so I'm going to go back to my sketch here. So what I'm going to do is make an array. I'm going to call it notes, because in this array I'm going to store some notes. Okay, so I'm going to make a major scale, which I happen to know I'm going to start at 50, and 52, 54, 55, 57, 59, 61, 62. All right, now you may or may, I'm not going to get into the musical side of how this works, but this would be the notes of whatever note is 50 as a MIDI note, okay? So now, and this is where it's going to start looking a little weird, but it will work. I'm going to go inside of my MIDI to Freak, and I'm going to write notes, and then inside of these square brackets, I am going to put 50. Or I'm sorry, no, I messed that up. Sorry. I want it to play the 50, so what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to refer to it by index number, okay? So the index of notes for 50 is 0. So 50 is the first value, so that would be 0. Remember, 0 is the first index of any array, okay? So now if I do that, and I press it, it gives me that. And just to kind of let you see what's going on here. In console.log, first I'm just going to put notes. So this is going to log the whole array. So if I do that, it sees this array. It's just going to keep going because it is inside of draw. So it's just updating. But here you see, I say, what is notes? And it tells me notes is all these notes inside of that array. Okay. But now if I do notes index 0, it gives me 50. And so when I press the key, since I have notes index 0 inside of the argument for the MIDI frequency, it gives me that. If I were to do notes index 1 and have it console log that, it would be 52. And we can hear that the note has increased, so it is playing this 52. If I do notes 2, it gives me this next one. So 0, 1, 2, this would be the index. It's giving me the note 54. Let's see, how many index do I have in this array? I have 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So if I do notes 7, remember we start at 0, and then I run that. Okay, it gives me 62. Now let's just see for a second what happens if I do index higher than what I have in my array. Okay, undefined. So why is it saying undefined? Because it's the 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. There's no 8th index in this array, so it's saying that is undefined. And if I probably tried to press a key, so it gives me something there, but certainly not a note within what I want. Maybe it's just going to the default of the os.freak. Okay, so that is how we can access notes in our array here. Now again, I still have to change it manually, so in the next video I'm going to get into something that will make it so that we can have access to all these notes depending on what key we press, and then we'll get a bit more into building the visuals for our xylophone.